Every eye in the lecture hall was locked onto one student. Barron Trump stood at the front of the class, marker in hand, facing a problem designed to humiliate him. The professor smirked, confident in her trap. What she didn't realize was that she had just challenged a certified 170 IQ prodigy. And within minutes, the entire class, and soon the entire university, would witness something unforgettable. But let's rewind. It all started in one of America's most prestigious universities, in Dr. Linda Markham's advanced calculus class. She was known for two things: her razor-sharp mathematical mind and her not-so-subtle political agenda. That morning, students expected a lecture on complex equations. Instead, the whiteboard displayed a message. Today's topic: redefining academic priorities. A quiet tension filled the room. In the back row sat Barron Trump, tall and composed in a sharp black suit. He rarely spoke, but everyone knew who he was. What they didn't know was that behind his reserved demeanor lay a mathematical mind that would soon leave everyone speechless. Dr. Markham began her lecture, but today something was different. She wasn't talking about calculus. Instead, she shifted the discussion to privilege and systemic biases in education. As she spoke, her gaze occasionally drifted toward Barron. It wasn't subtle. The implication was clear. After a few minutes, Barron raised his hand. A simple, patient gesture. The room grew still. Dr. Markham hesitated, then finally acknowledged him, her tone laced with sarcasm. "Yes, Mr. Trump? Do you have something to add to our discussion on privilege?" Barron's voice was calm but firm. "Professor, many of us chose this class to deepen our understanding of mathematics. Wouldn't reducing the core curriculum ultimately disadvantage everyone, regardless of background?" A few students nodded. Others glanced at each other, sensing the quiet challenge in the air. Dr. Markham's expression hardened. "Perhaps, Mr. Trump, you more than anyone should reflect on how privilege shapes education. Not everyone had private tutors and elite prep schools." Barron smiled, an expression of neither arrogance nor defensiveness, but understanding. "You're absolutely right, Professor. I have been fortunate. But doesn't that mean I have a responsibility to uphold the highest academic standards so that everyone, regardless of background, has the opportunity to rise?" Silence. A few students leaned in. They had never heard anyone speak to Dr. Markham like this before, especially not with such quiet confidence. The professor's eyes narrowed. "If you care so much about maintaining standards, Mr. Trump, let's put that to the test." She turned to the whiteboard, her marker moving swiftly. Students gasped as they recognized the equation, an advanced multivariable calculus problem that even graduate students would struggle with. Dr. Markham stepped back, her smirk returning. "Since you're so passionate about mathematics, let's see you solve this." Another hush fell over the room. Whispers passed between students. "That's graduate level. She's trying to humiliate him." Barron, unfazed, rose from his seat and walked to the board. "Of course, Professor. I'd be happy to." What happened next would be talked about for years. Barron studied the equation, then turned to the class. "There are multiple ways to solve this. Would you prefer the standard method or a more elegant approach using Leibniz's original insights?" Dr. Markham's expression flickered with confusion. "You've read Leibniz's original papers?" "Yes," Barron replied casually. "In German. The translations don't quite capture the elegance of his methodology." Murmurs rippled through the lecture hall. Then, with effortless precision, Barron began writing. Step by step, he worked through the problem, explaining as he went. But this wasn't just a solution. It was a masterclass. His voice was steady, his logic impeccable. Students who had struggled with calculus suddenly found themselves understanding. Several pulled out their phones, recording what was quickly becoming an academic spectacle. Dr. Markham's smirk had vanished. She watched in stunned silence as Barron reached the final step in just minutes, then turned to her, marker in hand. "Would you like to walk us through your solution, Professor?" The color drained from her face. The class held its breath. The dean, who had arrived moments earlier, stood frozen at the door. Everyone knew the truth. Dr. Markham had set a trap, and now she was caught in it. She hesitated, the weight of the moment crushing her. Then, to everyone's shock, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I made a terrible mistake." Barron nodded, then extended the marker back to her. "We all make mistakes, Professor. The question is, do we learn from them?" And with that, an entire university's perspective on learning, merit, and integrity began to shift.